What happened?
Share a few slides. Today's meeting should be relatively quick, just based on where we are in the process and in the project planning.
Hi, Susan.
Yeah, I'll just listen with my phone.
Susan, can you see the screen?
Yeah, I think you can see the screen, right, Susan?
Yes, no problem. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So you're just going to listen through my phone onto your phone?
Yes, and
Wow.
then I'm going to plug my phone in so it doesn't run out of juice.
Inception.
Okay. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so while I'm talking, if you can just mute so that there's no background noise, and then we'll get into a discussion. If you have a question at all, anybody, just interrupt me while I'm in the middle of talking. This is very informal. For those of you who are new to these calls, my name is Tony Garcia. I'm joined by Dana Wall. We're both in Miami, and we are urban planners, and we do demonstration projects and bicycle pedestrian planning primarily. And we're on our team. We've got a really great team of other professionals. JP Marketing and Prism are both marketing and event production firms, tools and engineering firm, and we're working with Numina to do data collection along the corridor at different locations.
And I'll just add, can I just add for anyone who's new, we have pretty much all of the other, well, not pretty much, all of the other previous CAC meeting recordings and presentations and documents and worksheets and stuff for the project are on the project webpage. So if, obviously, like Tony said, if you have any questions,
I've lost you on the phone, Ray.
If you have any questions, let us know. But you also, like everything else that we've discussed at the other CAC meetings and everything is on the webpage if you want to go back and reference those. And the webpage is on the last slide that we can share with everyone.
Right.
Dana, may I add something?
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Last night at City Council, can you hear me if I just talk normal?
Yeah.
Okay. Last night at City Council, they did a really excellent slideshow showing Maricopa Highway as it exists now and as it could exist in the future. So anyone can watch that on YouTube. Last night,
cool.
City Council, we had a special meeting just for the ATP project.
Great. Well, Susan, hold that thought. We want to hear what happened at that meeting.
I can't hear anything, Ray. Ray, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay,
We're good.
I couldn't hear Anthony. What did he?
Okay. All right. So we're going to give an overview of where we are in the project, talking about materials, and just where we are in the purchasing of the materials, and run you guys through how we do the implementation, the next steps of like who's doing what on the build day and how we plan that. And then we can go into the different skills worksheets that people sent over and just go over that. So overall in the process, we are in step 3. We're still in the process of getting our permit. We are very close. We're still waiting to hear back from Caltrans about the final permit acquisition date. And that's really going to set off the rest of the milestones in the project. So once we hear back from them, they have our entire permit package. They are reviewing it. They're going to send us comments back. I'm sure there's going to be another round of this to go. But we'll be able to actually set a date. So that's either at the end of July or at the beginning of August. And at this point, we're also doing a detailed timeline, getting all of our vendors in line in terms of who's doing the work, doing our build day timeline, which is what we'll do right now. We'll go over, and all the marketing materials that we'll have to produce to deploy onto the corridor. We're also working right now on getting our storage locations. And then next month in July, we'll have our next CAC meeting, our next workshop that will be the final workshop before the implementation. And then we'll do the demonstration project either at the end of July or the beginning of August. So just going over our budget and how that all works, how we organize ourselves. This is a screenshot of the budget right now. We have $100,000. Now, what does that mean? That means when we started the project, and we do this for all of our projects, for demonstration projects, we set a budget of whatever it is, consistent with the duration that the client wants, and also the length of the project. So for this one, because it was a 6-month project and because it was a mile in length, based on our experience, $100,000 is a reasonable budget for these materials. Oftentimes, if it's a third of a mile, we'll do it for $30,000. And basically, what that does is it forces us to make decisions about the materials, and it really makes us disciplined in terms of how we spend our money and the decisions that we make. So here you see the way that we organize this is we've got our categories of work. So that could be the white striping, the conflict zones, the planters, the delineators, etc. And then so that's all the category divided up, and then the next column over is what the specific item is that we're talking about as it keys back to our striping plan. So this is based off of the plans that we submitted to Caltrans. Those plans are not going to change substantially to impact this budget. At this point, they're going to ask us to add notations. They will ask us to move something over by a certain amount by a certain dimension, but it's not going to impact the raw square footages or quantities of materials that we're doing here, just so that you understand how this fits into the permitting process. We've already passed the point where we've gotten their okay on these numbers and these assumptions. So you can see we divide it up by project element and then get into getting quotes for each of these items. The materials are almost completely approved. We're still waiting on final approval on the Zikla armadillos and the planters, but we feel reasonably confident that those are going to be approved. And if the only potential hiccup is in the armadillos, if they come back and tell us that we need to use another product, that's fine. The armadillos are much more expensive than the delineators that they would otherwise approve by a factor of 2. So these are double the price. So that's not going to impact our overall numbers. So here you see where we're getting the materials from, where we're ordering it from. And once we start to place the orders, we're going to start to place the orders once we hear back from Caltrans and they tell us, okay, we only have a couple minor comments, address these, and we're going to issue the permit. Once we have that email in hand, then we will start to order these materials. So we'll list the delivery date, when it's expected to arrive, and the delivery location. And delivery location is really important because we want to be able to access these materials on the day of the installation or the days of the installation, which we're allocating right now about a week for installation. We may not need all that time since we're going to be working with vendors. And in terms of delivery location, we're looking at renting a storage pod, somewhere on the Nordhoff High parking lot or across the street at the church. So that's
and I had reached out to I believe David about that. I see that Adam is on the call, but yeah.
Okay, so in terms of what these materials look like, we've shown these at some of the other meetings, but just so that you get a feeling for the terminology again, the delineators in the top left corner, they look like sort of these round humps on the ground. That's what we call armadillos. And obviously it's just because of the shape of the delineator that we call it armadillos. They're placed, in this shot, you're seeing them placed within 2 white stripes. In our project, they are placed to the left of the white line that separates either the travel lane or the parking lane, and to orient yourself to the left if you're going in the direction of traffic. So you can see here the arrow points to one of the typical locations. They're separated by 20 feet. So in terms of our math and our budgeting, if we go back to our budget and we realize we're going to go over the $100,000, then one of the things that we can do is space these out further apart. That would require fewer delineators, and that's going to improve our numbers on the budget, not only on the raw material side, but on the installation side as well. A little bit more about the delineators. They have, they're affixed to the ground with anchor bolts that are bored into the pavement by 3 inches. And each of the armadillos has, I believe, 3 holes, right, Dana? and the planters as well are drilled into the ground. So one of the major tasks here is measuring out and drilling those holes so that we can then drill the armadillos in the ground. In the past, we have worked with volunteers for this task, but since there are 1,200 holes to be drilled, we just as well hire somebody to do that work. And we'll work with volunteers, and the street plans team will help deploy all the materials. These guys are pretty heavy and they're large, so it's going to take a lot of effort to deploy all the materials around the site. The planters as well, those are going to need to be drilled into the asphalt and affixed to the ground before we add any of the plants. So that's something that we're going to work with the contractor to do. And then we all and our volunteer team, all of you on the call and whoever else shows up, will be helping to plant our plants. In terms of the paint, we're working with this Sherwin-Williams latex traffic marking paint. This is not a temporary paint that we would have otherwise used because Caltrans does not have a way of approving a temporary paint in the way that they've approved the other delineators, or in the way that they are approving those other delineators. So we had to use one of their approved paints. And what that means is at the end of the project, the delineators can be removed, the planters can be removed, and the city will take ownership of those to do with them as they please. The paint will have to be sandblasted off, which we're factoring into our budget in terms of the removal budget. Like we have an installation budget of $100,000, we have a removal budget to come in and restore the street exactly as it is today. And then finally, the other element of this, so there's, going back to the paint, there's the striping, and we'll work with our vendors to actually just do the striping. So in other cases, we would work with you all to do the striping. In this case, the city feels more confident in having a vendor, a contractor, just do all the striping themselves. But we will be able to do with you all the conflict zones. So those green markings at driveways and intersections, we'll do those. We'll measure them out and we'll paint them together. It's a pretty straightforward task, but it gives you a sense of the hands-on activity that's involved in these projects. And then finally, the signage and banners. We have, we're producing banners that will be affixed to the light poles. The way that's going to work is we're going to have, what was it, 1 or 2 banners, Dana? I don't remember what we had netted out.
I think that we had decided to just start with 1 and then move it around every 6 weeks for cost efficiency. Caltrans
will not allow us to have a banner up for the entire length of the project. So what we're going to do is there are 4 light poles that are within Caltrans purview. The metal poles are Caltrans poles. We're going to print out 1 banner and have it on a pole. The maximum amount of time we can have it on the pole is for 6 weeks. So we're going to move it around every 6 weeks. 1 pole, and then the next 6 weeks, another pole, until the end of the project. That way, during the whole life of the project, there will be a banner there that has information about the project. That is what the project is in very general, large terms. This is the lane reduction demonstration project. And then there will be a web link for people to go to on their computers or their phones to be able to fill out the survey. So that's, and then there's also the other traffic signage that we're getting quotes for the professional installation of those, but we also have informational signage at a pedestrian level about what the project is, so that people who are walking around, either students or just normal folks who have not been involved in this process, can get information about it more than what they see on the banner, and also have that survey link and more detailed information. In terms of the implementation, the way that we set this up is once we have all of our vendors and our contractors lined up, we'll set up a calendar, basically a multi-day schedule in half-hour or hour increments, sometimes even less than that tell us all what we're doing. So what is Kathy doing? And where's Souza? And where is Greg and his team? So the city staff will have a role to play. Our street plans team will be on the ground there as well. And then all of you or whoever else we enlist in this project we'll know ahead of time because we're going to have a volunteer sign up in the weeks ahead of the project, and then we'll tell everybody what they're doing. So for this project, since it's less painting heavy, it's really going to be about moving materials around. So we might say, okay, Souza, take these flowers over to location A, and we'll set up stations along the corridor that'll all be labeled so that all the volunteers will know where to go. We'll also have a tent set up at Nordhoff High that will be our main staging area or our volunteer check-in, and somebody will be there to direct people. All of us will also have our phones, and so, you know, whoever's at the main volunteer tent, let's say, I don't know, let's say Ray, you're in charge of being at the volunteer tent. Somebody shows up and they're supposed to be helping with one of the conflict zone markings at church. You'll call me up and say, hey, Jane is going over to your location, just so that you know there's somebody on the way. And then that's basically how we'll distribute the work. Each station will have a few people. There will be one group of people that are just going back and forth distributing materials. Usually I'll walk up and down this street. I mean, my steps on my Apple Watch or my phone are going to be in the tens of thousands over the course of those few days, because I will walk back and forth along this corridor asking everybody what they need and directing the distribution of materials. It's just a lot of logistics.
If you want to go to the next slide, you can show them also the manual.
Sure. Okay, I'll go to the manual in a second. Here you see an example of one of our build day manuals. We'll take our striping plan and we'll take this information and compile it into an actual document that we laminate and bind, and we'll have it on site. And it's what will direct the work. So if there's ever a question about what a dimension should be or how wide something should be or what we're doing in a certain location, it's in this document. And that's the document that Caltrans will have approved, and it's what guides the whole effort. And so there will probably be one over by the volunteer tent, and then I'll have one, and we'll have one that floats around the corridor. We'll also have these vests that people can wear that are, brightly colored to show, that these are volunteers. We'll also have volunteer waivers that people need to sign. And all of the work that's happening is happening within the right-of-way, but in an area that has already been closed to traffic. So early on the first morning, the traffic control company will come out and they'll distribute a bunch of cones to block off the outer lane. And we'll work within that area. And that traffic control will be up the entire time that we're working. Let's see, in terms of how we're implementing the work and who's doing what at this general stage, street plans and all of you, our volunteer team, we will be coordinating the contractors, so directing work when a contractor gets there, telling them what to do, and just making sure that work is consistent with the build plans. We will coordinate our volunteer force, and we'll lead the measurement of those items that the contractors are not due. We'll do the conflict zone implementation, which is going to take a significant amount of time. That's a 2-day project right there, just the conflict zones alone. And then making sure that the signage, the informational signage that we're installing is located correctly around the site. And finally, probably the biggest effort on this project that we're going to be doing with volunteers is planting. And we're looking for someone, right now we're interviewing folks that can help direct not only the curation of the plants that we're working with, but also help us direct the work of the planting and get us a good price on the plants themselves. In terms of what the contractors are doing, they are going to be doing any existing removal of existing striping, the thermoplastic, where it conflicts with our project, in those locations where there is where there are pavement markings in the outer lane where the bike lane is going to be or the parking, that needs to be removed. So we're working with contractors to do that. They will also be painting with a striping machine the white lines and the buffer lines. So it's going to be really cool for all of you who are not familiar with this to see that in action. It's very interesting. It's going to go by pretty fast. interesting process. And then finally, that hole drilling and the installation of the barriers. The city is going to assist with whatever tasks we need help with, where the contractors need additional support from us, or where our volunteer team needs help. And then obviously, you all, our volunteers, will be working together on any number of items, which could include cleanup. We need to make sure that the site is still maintained clean, or photography, or volunteer management and coordination, or any of the other items that we've already talked about. Just a few shots of what this looks like. We've shown you these before in previous presentations, but we're getting close. And as in our next CAC, we'll have even more detail about what we're all doing. So it's an additive process, and now I think you'll understand a little bit more about what happens. So there's a big part of this. The first day or two, we're really just staging and showing and putting the materials out in the locations where they need to go. Another big element that happens up front is just measuring out with a chalk line and a measuring wheel, or a measuring tape, just all of the major elements of the project. So here you see in this middle shot, the creation of some conflict zone markings. There is edging for the conflict zone markings. So one part of it is what happens in the middle of the conflict zone marking, and then the other is what happens on the edge. And so what we're going to look for you all to do is, where we might do the edging ourselves. Dana is very meticulous, as are other folks on our team. But if you consider yourself a very careful person when it comes to painting, maybe you're a person that helps out with the edge condition, because that really needs to be super crisp and sharp. Whereas the middle, you don't, there's less precision involved in that. You're just filling up the area with paint. So these are the main tasks that we'll be working with you guys in terms of the volunteer effort. And you can see how we do the marking of the conflict zones. We use tape to mark the border. We edge it, we paint in the middle, and then we remove the tape to reveal the final shape of whatever it is, the area that's been painted.
Tony, could I, do you want to finish this slide? I just have some questions that people want to ask.
Sure. Okay, so next steps, the Numina sensors, we are really just waiting on Caltrans to give us that indication of date so that we can have those sensors installed. They're being shipped as early as Monday of next week. So that's a really important milestone. We're very excited about that. We're waiting on the Caltrans permit comments. I would love to say that they're going to get here by Friday. That would have been 2 weeks since we sent in the permit set. And that's been about their turnaround time so far in this project. And hopefully by that time, we'll be able to set the date. If not this week, then for sure we need to have heard from them by next week to set the date for implementation. And then we'll have our final Q&A session with the broader community outside of this group in July, once we have our date and more clarity on all of our next steps, basically. And then finally, our next CAC meeting, which is on July 15th, will be a far more detailed run through of who's doing what. By that time, you all will have signed up for whatever positions you want to be involved with, whether it's volunteer coordination or whatever it is, and we will have assigned you to your respective positions. We will have contracted with our vendors, ordered our materials. So by June 15th, we should already have received a bunch of materials, or they will be on their way. And that's pretty much it. Now, Dana, let's go through these questions.
Yeah, so I thought that Ray asked a good question. Since we have Greg on the phone and everyone else, he asked what happens to the plants when the project is over, which is always a great question. And so I told him that sometimes we offer the plants for donation, but then there's also, I guess, a chance that the city could reuse them. I didn't know if you or Greg wanted to also speak on that, if we've thought about that yet.
Hey, this is Greg talking, and yeah, I think it's pretty wide open. We don't have the plant selection finalized. There was, I think, this consideration to either talk more about that this meeting or a separate meeting. But yeah, depending on the plants and so on, we'd like to help the budget by not spending a lot of money. So if people are donating and want them back, that's terrific. You know, there's some people have nurseries that can let us borrow them. And there's some plants that we could use around the city. We don't have a huge demand for them, but depending on the plant type, we might be able to use them, you know, for instance, around Libby Park Fountain area or other places around the city. So it's kind of wide open at this point.
Yeah. And then, so I think Sousa had several questions, and then I think we do want to talk about the plants a little bit. And then obviously if anyone else has any questions, just holler. But yeah, Sousa, do you want to go for it? You're on mute, I think.
Oh, okay,
Great.
sorry.
Okay.
Remember, I can't hear you. I can only hear you through the phone. So what was I going to say? Oh, it seems super important to convey to the public that the permanent project, that the demonstration project is not going to, the permanent project will not look like the demonstration project. That's correct, right? I think otherwise there are people might jump to conclusions. So it seems like, you know, we're going to have to do some real good press releases and explain everything, just like we're doing now, but get more people, you know, to be on this call or do a presentation at City Council or something like that. And then the other thought that I keep having in the back of my mind is, you said that when the demonstration project is over, everything will go back to where it was. But what if the demonstration project is really successful, everybody's very happy with it, is it an option with Caltrans to not have a big gap between the end of the demonstration project and the beginning of construction? Do you get is that clear, my question?
Totally. That's a great question. Right now, our expectation is, and the expectation of Caltrans is that it's removed at the end of the 6 months. There is some permit provision that we have to deal with if we want to extend it out. And we are working on that right now with them to just be clear about that, so that if in 3 or 4 months we convene, because these CAC meetings are going to continue, right? Our expectation is that this group convenes again throughout the life of the demo. And if we decide 3 or 4 months in, like, guys, this is working, this is a good idea, let's keep it, then we have to go back to Caltrans. It's not off the table that it has to return back to the way that it was. We just have to jump through some other regulatory hoops, and we're figuring out what those are right now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great.
And I also,
okay.
yeah. And I also wanted to mention, so the particular parts of the demonstration project that won't look like the permanent, I mean, the biggest piece there is the planters. So in the permanent project, obviously they have spec'd for full trees. And so I just wanted to build on Sousa's point that the planters that we have in the demonstration project are not what is spec'd for the permanent project. The permanent project is actually planting trees. So we have these planters that will be bolted and will be removed with plants and soil inside of them. We have proposed to the city that they do consider reusing the delineators, possibly the armadillos, because you know, for the permanent project as well, just because they will have them, and you know, we think that they could also be incorporated into the permanent project.
Dana, you touch on the planting as well, the landscaping on the northbound side. If you can imagine leaving the Y and heading for El Roblar or towards Miners Oaks, the planters on that side from Pyrie to El Roblar will be vegetation, shrubs, and so on in those planters, because there's some concern that the tree roots might be an issue for a sewer line that's over on that northbound side. The southbound side would be all trees, though.
Cool.
I'm muted.
Can I just ask one question?
Here, just so everybody, 1 second, Sousa. From Pyrie to Roblar, that's what we're showing here in this drawing. So these planters will not have trees, they'll just have shrubs or flowers. Mm-hmm. That's what
for the permanent, right? Yeah, in the temporary.
For the permanent.
Yeah, in the demonstration, there's no trees. It's all shrubbery and so on.
Right.
But the, just to clarify for because I'm sorry, this is my first meeting, so
Sure.
I'm sure I'm a little behind on this. So
Sure.
you're putting the planters where for the permanent project, you're locating the planters with the little low stuff in it, but those are in the same location where you will be planting trees. Is that correct? Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
That's correct. That's correct. They are in the locations where the permanent trees will be, or approximately, but they're just not going to have the height. And I'm trying to see if we can afford to do like a small tree, but the landscapers that keep telling us that with the water needs that's just not practical. I'm trying to get some height in there so that it looks more elegant. Everything that they're giving us is very low or succulents, which you're not going to be able to see from the street. I mean, you'll see them, but they're just not going to be as nice. So we're still working that out, what the plant species are.
Yeah. If anyone has, I know that we have a couple of people who have experience with planting and gardening and that sort of thing. If you want to just throw out kind of your initial suggestions, both on like choices of plantings or, maintenance considerations as well for Greg, that would be really helpful because we're still deliberating about, I think the priority is getting plants and flowers that would be in season, I guess, or not dormant, right? Like starting in the fall. And then also we don't want to plant things that are too immature because we want them to look good basically when we plant them. And so it's kind of, Tony and I don't know too much about plants. So if anyone wants to.
I know about plants. Wait, I know about plants in Miami.
Okay.
Come on,
Tropical
Kathy, go
plants.
for it. Tell us. Kathy, go for it.
Yeah. So Grant and I spoke a little bit about the plants. We had a conversation last week. And so I do have some suggestions, and I'm not sure, I just wanted to be clear. Do you have an outside contractor that you're hiring to do the selection, or is this all through the volunteers, or how's that working?
We're trying both avenues. Well, the selection itself, we started out going to landscapers, just landscape contractors, and said we have 80 planters. They're X number of gallons. How much would it be? Without giving them any sort of like list of, and then they gave us back what they could have, a price for that. And then now we're trying to be more thoughtful about what the plants are, and instead of hiring a landscape contractor to do that whole job, we're thinking we can go out and just buy the 80 plants or the 100 and whatever number of plants, and then work with you all to plant them ourselves.
Okay, good. So I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but I will be happy to volunteer to be a coordinator for this.
Okay.
I'm a landscape architect, but I'm also a landscape contractor.
Okay,
So
cool.
my suggestion is, we can figure it out, and maybe there's a team of some other people. I know John Lamar, he's not on the call, I don't think, but he had sent his
we saw that
volunteer form, and I know John is a contractor also. And there may be some other people that want to be on the team, but this is what I think may be a good idea. And Greg kind of alluded to it. If there are any plants that we can reuse and use for city plantings, I know the city's been doing, bioswales and rain gardens and what have you, or some other locations, or if it's some material that can easily be taken out of the planters after 6 months, dropped into a container and easily used for the final project. But we could determine what that is. We want to make sure that it's labor and maintenance and cost effective to do that. But we could come up with a prototype of plant material, and I agree with what Dana was saying. It may be the thing where we come up with a variety of selections, contact a couple of wholesale growers, find out what's available and looking good and that we know is going to look good for 6 months. So we're going to look at low maintenance. I also talked to Greg about watering, because it sounds like they have a built-in water system, but you do have to fill it up periodically. Yeah. So Greg probably can answer this, but he said maybe his crew could actually take care of that. So in other words, I'm just volunteering to coordinate all that.
Cool.
And we can order the plants through wholesale growers to get a really good price. As far as the soil mix goes, it's easy sometimes to have things in bags if you have volunteers. but it costs more money. But we have some really good soil supply companies in the county where we could get a custom mix. I mean, I looked at the specs, Dana sent them to me, but we can figure out what that is. And basically it would be a bulk delivery. Then you'd have to move it around in wheelbarrows and shovels.
Right, right.
Which isn't, it's a little maybe messier and a little more cumbersome, but not necessarily. Or maybe we have somebody has a bobcat and we can move it around.
Right, right.
Pipe in quickly there, Kathy, and a couple things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ideally, and I think, is Adam? Yeah, Adam's still on the phone. Hopefully the school will allow us to use a corner of the parking lot kind of near the job, maybe two corners, you know, the east and west end. And maybe like you're saying, we could have a dump of soil type at each end. And the city does have a skid steer and a backhoe and
there you go.
Dump trucks. We could move soils around a couple ways. We even have like the Gator landscaping type vehicles with some trailers and so we can move around that way, you know, pickup trucks, all that kind of options. But I think the biggest concern I have is that, you know, we're big on native plantings here, but unfortunately the whole period we're talking about here, which would be August through December, is typically dormant for all these plants. So if we go out and do a bunch of really cool sage and poppies, they're going to be dormant. So we really need to, that's what I was hoping. I know that you, Kathy, always a spectacular volunteer for all these kind of efforts, and John Lamar as well. I mean, you people probably have great input, as well as Lisa Phelps and so on. That maybe we don't do natives for this. We do something that still pop and still
I agree.
Look terrific. You know, in the media.
I love natives too, but sometimes it's not easy to find them sizable. And you're right, a lot of them, that's going to be their dormant period. So I think it really depends on what's going to work in our climate, you know, the water, and what's going to look good and be really low maintenance. And potentially we can either reuse them, or maybe we have a sale at the end and, you know, people can come and get them for a minimal price, or some of them the city keeps. But we could coordinate all that ahead of time, how it's going to work, including what are we going to do with the plants at the end and the soil and everything.
Totally.
Yeah, and I'll add,
start to finish.
So I'll add too, in terms of like the height of the plants, I think it would be good to find a balance between plantings that have a presence, right? So we don't want them to be too low in the planter themselves. It would be nice if they
want to see it.
high. Yeah, people want to see it, but we probably can't go higher than like 3 feet from from the soil up, just because then total, I think that would be about 4 feet if you include the height of the planter, which I think is probably already getting up there in terms of visibility.
So that's good. And I think the other thing to mention too is in 6 months, depending what the plant material is, there's not going to be a lot of growth. So we want to find something in the container that's pretty close to being the right height, et cetera, and being full and beautiful and meeting our requirements. So, but we can come up with a preliminary list that and some photos that we share with everyone, and maybe do some plant combos. I don't know if we want to have the same one ditto, but we could do a little bit of variety to make it interesting, but not, you know, over the top.
Yeah, we actually,
so it's doable.
In one of the quotes that we got from, one of the quotes had actually listed out a couple a couple plants that are brightly colored, but Greg and I weren't sure if there's something that are dormant in the fall. So we have like, I don't really know, Mataliha poppy, but we already have poppies, I guess, alongside.
The Matilla poppy is huge and in a container. It's not the right plant.
Okay.
I don't believe it's native, but
yeah, practically all those natives we're talking about, right? Because I think California poppy was on there, some sage was on there, Matilla poppy. Yeah, they'll look great in spring, about March. But
you could even send me the list, or like I said, if we want to have a team of people, I don't want to hog the whole thing, but I mean, we can put it, you know, review the list and
I think
maybe conversation or phone call, because it seems like, I know Kathy, and if that John's computer is John Lamar, that would be great for sure. If you guys could help us, hopefully on a half an hour phone call, get some great ideas. And if anybody else is good on plants would like to help on that, that'd be terrific.
Yeah, I know. I think Julie on the call is interested in helping. So yeah, we could have a plant call where we just set it up and maybe send out the list that you've already got. And if you want us to kind of vet that, Right.
And then in addition, we can come up with some new ideas. But I think we all kind of know the criteria. You know, it needs to
Right.
look good, low maintenance, low water, the height restrictions, work in a container, and then ultimately, what are we going to do with them when they're done?
Yeah, and just I guess
Yeah.
where we would source them from too. I think.
Now that part's easy.
Yeah.
I can help coordinate that and just keep it
Okay,
at the
cool.
wholesale cost, and
Okay,
I think that's not going to be a problem.
cool.
Awesome. Well, and then in terms of the other, so I think that everyone, we have a couple of new people that I might not have been able to send our skills and resources worksheet. So the skills and resources worksheet is basically just gives you an option if you do want to volunteer for something for the project, maybe what specifically you'd want to do. So I can follow up and send that to everybody on this call who I don't think received it. I think the only person that maybe Catherine, I don't know if Catherine and Evan, I don't know if and maybe Teresa. So I'll send that to you guys if you're interested, but so that's things like we're talking about now, like plants and soil, or even like if you have a lot of tools, if you have tape measures, if you have chalk lines, that sort of thing, if you put that down on the sheet and we end up needing those, we would come back to you. So yeah, I can forward in case anyone's interested, but Tony, do you think we have anything else to cover? Does anyone else have any questions about just the project in general and where we're at and anything else at all? Just,
I have one question.
yeah.
So are you guys going to require volunteers to wear masks? I hope. Are you
Yes.
gonna?
Yeah.
Please, I mean, I'm making a request that be done.
I think to pipe in a little bit from the city, you know, we've got standards we've established, and one of those standards is outside with proper spacing is generally not considered high risk. So if people are all working well apart, whether that's 12 feet or whatever, that is a consideration. But certainly everybody's trying to take care of everybody's health. So if we're, if there's somebody who's more concerned, even at 12 foot, there's a lot of accommodations can be made. But and we could even have a discussion about that, how to handle it, and still, it seems like every day it's a serious discussion about how we're handling this, right?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Greg. I think that it might be a good idea to just make everybody have a mask available. So when you violate the 6 foot spacing, you should just be able to put your mask up. And working hard outside is difficult to breathe.
So it seems like part of our guidelines would be
to
try to keep spacing, whatever that might be, 10 or 15 feet, all the volunteers working apart. And be extra careful, because then people get casual if you're within 3 to 6. But if you're within, I don't know, I'm just throwing out, if we're within 10 feet, please wear a mask, and we have them all available, and everybody enforces that amongst each other. You can complain to one of the supervisors or mention it if we need to go enforcement, because it seems to be an ongoing debate. But I see it in the news daily, right? There's spikes going on, so we all need to be continue to be careful.
Susan, what's up?
Yeah, I want to make a simple suggestion. We can be like our mayor, Johnny, and just have a bandana that you keep around your neck, because it's nice anyway. It's going to be hot and kind of sweaty. And you can just put it back on if you're in a close conversation or working together, whatever. So something, just let people know ahead, so they don't have to reach in their pocket or put a mask on. It can just be around their neck. There's I have all kinds of things like that.
Yeah, and this is a good discussion to remind us that when we start doing outreach to solicit volunteers, that we need to include this information in there. Yeah.
And
So
we'll consider that as we put together the build day plan and the staffing of each of the sections, and as we think through how we're doing the actual work.
Yeah. So I guess in terms of next steps, so we have the third public Q&A session on July 1st. All of this is on the project webpage. You can go on and register already right now. And then we'll have our 5th CAC meeting, which even if the project is early August, I think that will probably be our final CAC meeting. We might have maybe another like implementation prep meeting like right before the project if we think it's necessary, but that 5th CAC meeting will really be focused on like the fine details of the implementation, basically the final versions of all of the things that we showed you today and already went over. So that 5th CAC meeting is July 15th, which you can also sign up for. And then I guess just in the near term, we're printing some signage on sandwich boards to put out on the corridor to get kind of an on-street physical presence. Most of our outreach right now, obviously, because we haven't, has been virtual just because of COVID restrictions, but the city's going to go out and put some stuff out there so that when people start frequenting the businesses again, they see it. And so they're aware of the project. But, and once we get the actual implementation dates, we'll be doing a lot more, just a lot more push soliciting volunteers and letting people know of the project, which we will, count on you guys for to help us get the word out there. But other than that, that's pretty much it.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
The July 1st Q&A is not really set, is that correct? Until we see when we get the Caltrans approval, or is that date set?
Well, we've set it. Yeah, we've been advertising it. I think regardless, it'll be valuable because we'll probably go over what we went over today as well for other people. And I mean, fingers crossed by July 1st, we've at least heard from Caltrans. So
That's fine. I just wanted
hopefully, yeah, it is set.
That's a good point, Susan.
Yeah, I think it's also, even if it's just good to have these meeting sets as kind of regular check-in points with the community. We can always schedule more if we need. But yeah, I think we'll keep that as it is for now, just to avoid any confusion. And yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I think that's all we had. Yeah.
That's it.
What about the meeting separately, Dana? Are you going to send an email out to try to talk about landscaping a bit more? Yeah. Yeah.
So I think I will. I'll include, for sure, Kathy. I know Julie's interested. John, I assume you're interested in joining that conversation. And then anybody else? Is anyone else on the call particularly interested in plants and want to help us kind of form all of that?
I'm okay with that. I want to help.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I think we'll have a separate conversation. And I can send out, like Kathy said, I can send out the few recommendations, I guess, that we've received so far, just so you guys can see where we're at. But yeah.
Susan, can you stay on the phone for a minute after the meeting so I can ask you?
And like always, we will be posting this video on the webpage as well as the slides. So if you happen to get any questions, from people who weren't able to join, go on the webpage. And we also still have the pre-implementation survey is still on the webpage. So if you guys haven't taken that, that would be great. And then, we're hoping to get a lot of responses from that because we'll be using it basically to compare to the survey responses after project implementation. So just flagging that.
Kathy, did you have something else to add? You had your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to mention, Dana, I had asked you and you'd sent me the specs on the containers. That's something you might want to just send out to the plant people too, just so they have an idea,
yeah,
like,
of course.
Okay, how big and how deep and the water
Totally.
system and the soil, ideas for soil mix, etc. Okay.
Sounds good.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, everybody. Thank you, guys. Yeah, we'll be in touch.
Thanks, everybody, for participating. Appreciate it.
Bye, all.